Okay. Is it working now? Let me look. It looks like it actually connected. It is working. It looks like it actually connected. It's working. It's a miracle. Okay. For whatever reason, my OBS wouldn't connect with the stream before, but it's working now. So I guess right. So now we got two people watching. All right. So I'll go back. I'll start from the beginning. I'm going to go ahead and just stream this broadcast, and I don't know if comments are turned off or what, but I don't see any comments. I would rather see comments. Okay. So this is the first class self-mastery, and it's focused primarily on who we are, because self-mastery, and I want to get this out of the way when it comes to my personal goals and why I teach this class, because, and I want to get feedback from the community to see what you guys want, because if you guys don't align with what I want, then what's the point of me doing whatever I'm doing, right? My intent has always been to create a situation where we can create the most abundance for everybody. And there's no way that I can do that by myself, right? But if you create an intent, and this has a lot to do with who we are. If you create that intent, then you can, eventually you get the knowledge, right? There's millions of children starving. And if you grew up in certain areas, there's really not much abundance available to you, right? You don't have, you can't, what are the odds that you meet somebody that grew up in Central Africa, that was an orphan, that grew up in an orphanage, who's just thriving as an individual? You don't meet them very many times. And I've never met one. I've met other, black people in the United States that grew up here, but that was, they grew up here. And so we should be able to come up as a community, right, in society, to create abundance for everybody. And it all starts internally. And you have to think, okay, why are those places not giving, why are people not be giving the tools and the resources to create and receive together? And so that's the focus of what self-mastery is. And so if you can surrender to what other people need and still can make sure that you're maintaining your own needs, then you can come to a place of self-mastery, because, we're never happy if we're, just taking care of ourselves and ignoring everybody else. But then if we're just taking care of everybody else and ignoring ourselves, that's not a good way to be either. So we'll get started. So who are you? And that's the main thing that, got to think about. We're not taught that in school. Nobody told us who we are, what we are. And that becomes a serious point of discussion, especially when you hear certain actors, right? When actors fall into roles where they're pretending to be somebody else all the time. And then sometimes they kind of lose touch with who I am, right? They're creating these artistic characters, but then they can lose touch with who they are. I don't know the specifics have happened with what the guy that played in The Dark Knight. I can't remember his name, but it'll come to me. I don't know if that's what happened to him. It's terrible when somebody takes their own life, but there is definitely negative consequences of just not knowing who you are, because you don't know what your purpose is in life, and so maybe you're not doing what you think you did. Keith Ledger, and this comes back to one of the other points that I'll get to later, or Heath Ledger. Heath Ledger, killed himself because of that terrible. He played the Joker, and the Joker was a really hard role. It wasn't healthy for your psychology, right? If you're doing something that is inherently lunatic. It's like you're playing a lunatic who is just out to just create chaos and just, mayhem for everybody, and just fall into that character. And maybe that was part of the reason why he got in such a depressive state. I don't know. But knowing who we are is paramount to for us to enjoy life. So, and that falls into self-mastery, because you're never going to really master your own state of being and emotional states until you can really see the path that's going out before your feet. You don't have to know all the answers, but if you know your intent and know that you'll get all the answers at the right time when you need it, then things get a lot easier, right? Then you fall out of fear and anxiety and all those things. So who are we? All of us are a point of awareness, right? I mean, that's a very simple way of putting it, but if I'm a point of awareness, what is that describing? Well, if we look at anything in this reality, including the field of flowers behind me, we're a point of awareness, a source point that is creating something and then receiving something. And it's always receiving what it's creating. It's a closed loop. So the flowers there, right? They're the tulips behind me. They're blossoming, but they're also turning carbon dioxide to oxygen and absorbing sunlight, right? They're receiving heat, receiving support. And since they're receiving support from the sun, the point of awareness in the center of a bigger system that they're in, that's another key point. They are transmuting something that would be poisonous to other things that they're living around into something healthy. And then they have a root system where they're receiving all their nutrients and water under the ground. And that's basically who we are. I mean, the tulips behind me are living their purpose for sure, right? I mean, what else would they be doing? I love the quote in the Bible that says, see the lilies of the field and how they grow. Neither do they toil or something. In them lays more wisdom than, the King of Solomon ever had. And so there's secrets to growth. And if we can unlock the secrets of growth within ourselves and create systems and create communities that support that growth, because, right, going back to what I started with, we live in a world that doesn't support growth everywhere. As a matter of fact, I would say that we live in a world that doesn't support growth anywhere, once you really understand what growth is. Because if growth is just to create from your heart space and then receive whatever comes back from the world around you, then where is that being supported? Right? We go to school and we got taught roles to go to work jobs that we don't, to put money in somebody else's pocket. That's not creating from your heart space. That's yeah. So not only are we that point of awareness, we are creating the structure that we see, the tulip, and then the field of energy around it. Our emotional state, that is the definition of our mental state and our emotional state. So the structure moves energy, or your thoughts create your emotions, right? When you think about the things that you're thinking, if you're thinking, I'm terrible, or I'm this or that, then you're creating a really terrible emotional state, right? You'll get into a state of depression and you won't feel good about yourself. If just the opposite of that, it's like, man, I love getting up in the morning. I love just having that first cup of coffee or whatever it is that, that you love to do in the morning, or go on that run or hike a mountain. It creates a really positive emotional state, and it gives you more energy because you love doing whatever you're doing. And that's a really important part of self-mastery. When you're getting up and you don't love doing what you're doing, then eventually you'll fall into something else. I just recently watched a Alan Watt video I think it's his best video. And it's about how many spiritualists and many spiritual communities fall into non-detachment and stop creating anything. There's no culture there. All they do is they sit there and meditate. And then when you see them, a lot of times you'll see that there's Buddhist communities that are like that, right? They just get into a meditative state and they fall into non-detachment, and then they don't really do anything else. They said that they've fallen into a state of peace, but then they have no desire. Right? If you have no desire to create, and the thing that you're creating isn't fulfilling for you, then you might as well just sit in a cave and die. What's the point of just sitting there meditating and not interacting with anything and having no desire? What's the point of that, right? You're not growing. You're just fading away. And that's what we see, right? Those people just fade away. So how do we think about what we want to create? And how is it that we create from our heart space? Right? Our minds get in the way a lot. And I had this conversation with my dad earlier, but I can tell you guys about something that happened to me recently that was really cool. And it's something that I've learned, that your heart already knows everything around you because it's your center point, right? Everything comes from and goes back to the heart. And then every time we expand out to a larger picture of the field, there's just one heart. When we look at a picture of a galaxy, it's spiraling around, or it might not be a spiral. It could be a cluster of galaxies, that each have different center points, but they're always a toroidal field. It's a toroid. It's always one point that goes out, and then it comes back, and then it comes back in upon itself. And when you look closer and you look inside that, everything looks the same, including our own biofield, or these flowers here behind me. We have our center point, and it goes out, and then it comes back, and everything that's coming back is in darkness because it's trying to get back to the center, just like the roots of the flower here. And everything that's coming out is in the light because the light is producing it, and there's one point of light right in the middle, right? Actually, what's creating the light is the solar plexus just below the heart, because everything that's coming back is burning brighter and brighter and brighter, and then as it's dying, it's changing its momentum, and as it spins faster around that center point, especially when we look at a black hole, it looks the same way. It's collapsing back into the heart. And so that's why, that teaching surrender is really important, but then balancing surrender with what we're creating. And if we're creating from a point of surrender, that's when you can really get as close to the heart space and then get to a point of self-mastery. So how do we do that? Go back to the original story. I was at a Dave Matthews concert, and my brother and I had just sat down next to a couple next to me, and they had sat down. I could tell they were probably close to my age, and they sat down, and the gal turned towards me. She goes, "It's my birthday!" And I was like, "Great, awesome." And she's like, and she looked at me and she goes, "How old am I?" I was like, "Whew." When somebody who's approximately my age asks you how old they are, you just kind of, a lot of people's gut, knee-jerk response would be to just say, "Well, you're half, you look half your age, or you look 25 or whatever." And my brother guessed first. He was sitting next to me. And I threw my head back, and I didn't even think about the words that was going to come out of my mouth. And I threw my head back, and I go, 51. And the number 51 never even entered my head. Now, if we think about it, our creative circuit is coming from our heart. From the heart, the mouth speaks. So there's a misconception. If you're letting your mind control your mouth, you're actually disconnected with your heart, right? So if you're trying to think about too much of what you're going to say, then you're actually not speaking from your heart. And she looked at me and she goes, "How'd you know that?" And I just said, and I brushed it off. It's like, oh, I'm an intuitive. I wrote a book about it. And she goes, oh, okay. And we just started enjoying the concert again. It was before the concert actually started. You know, they were just trying to find a good place to sit. And yeah. So another way to really know that you already have access to everything that you need to know, and you can operate out of your heart space when it comes to remembering things. Like my dad came to me the other day, and he was really upset because he was always trying to forgetting things, and he could never remember anything. And I said, and I had learned this, and I have learned this, and it's how I remembered Heath Ledger. Just at the beginning of this video, if you go back to the beginning of this video, this is how I remembered the name Heath Ledger, because I stopped trying to remember it. I told him, I said, what's worked for me is if you just forget it. If you can't remember something, don't worry about it. Just forget about trying to remember whatever it is that you're trying to remember, and go do something else. And then before you know it, it'll pop right back in your head. And he thought about that, and I said, it works for me all the time. And I've gotten really good at it. I used to just beat myself up if I couldn't remember something, or especially when you set something down and you can't remember where you put it. You know, that's the worst case, especially when you need to leave somewhere. It's like you can't find your wallet, and you're supposed to be somewhere, and you're trying to get in your car, and you're just, going through the house trying to figure out, where is this thing? The hardest thing to do is to forget about trying to look for it, right? And that can be really hard psychologically. But 99 times out of 10, if you just forget about it and just do something else and say, I guess I don't need to know about that right now, within minutes after forgetting about it, it'll pop in your head. You'll remember where you put it, or you'll remember a name, or you remember what you needed to do, because you already know. Your heart knows. And if your heart is guiding you, then it'll never guide you wrong. The last thing you want to do is try and get your mind in the way and believe that, I need to do something when I don't. And so that's why, when you look at the flowers and the fields of lilies behind me and how they grow, there's no brain going on there. You're literally just seeing a heart. And that's why we see the longest living organisms in this world that are trees and mycelium. Actually, the longest living organism on the planet is mycelium. The honey mushroom, it's in Central Oregon. I think it's like 8,900 years old. There's a cedar tree in northern Idaho that is 3,000 years old. And it's really interesting to go see that tree and just look at the center, the heart of that tree, because 3,000 years ago was a seed right where you're looking. And it just grew in both directions. And it grew for 3,000 years because it was always being supported. It always had a source of water, and it always had sunlight. And so it always was able to do its purpose, right? Is turn carbon dioxide to oxygen. Amazing, right? When you really stop and think about and look at the world around us, self-mastery is everywhere. And usually you don't find it in people, right? People, we are too caught up in our heads thinking what we need to do. I need to do this or that, or I'm going to die. Not understanding that you can't die. You're connected to everything in your heart space. And so if you just let it create what it's supposed to create, then you'll receive what you need to receive, and you'll be supported. Now, how do we get to living in a world that does that? Well, centralized governance wants to become the heart of the system. So you don't want to create anything outside of yourself that it has to make decisions for you. That's not healthy. And so that's why we died at a young age, right? We create systems where we want to retire from what we're doing because we don't like it, right? If you love what you're doing, you'd never retire. I just had this conversation with my son's coach yesterday. He went to his final long distance running banquet, and the head coach of his team is, I would guess he's in his late 60s, probably early 70s. And I said, so, and I knew what the answer was going to be when I ran into him. I said, so, when are you going to retire? He's like, I'm never going to retire, as long as they'll keep having me, right? As long as he can keep walking and keep moving around, because he just loves the kids. And I could tell that he loved running when he was really younger, when he was young, and he loves to watch kids doing what they love to do and guiding them and training them and to make them feel better about accomplishing what they want to accomplish. Right? What a wonderful thing to do. Really find what it is that you really love to do and just keep doing it. And you'll live to be very old if you can do that. And if you can, it's great to create for yourself and to create, and that's why I do these videos, to teach this, because it's in my heart to make sure that we are creating from our heart space and not creating from some point of fear or some level of anxiety. And then that moves into areas that are much more profound, especially when you realize that everything is available to you from your heart. Everything. If you can create from your heart, and both emotionally and both intellectually, and stay grounded, because your heart's always at the ground. That's the ground state, right? I mean, the earth that we're standing on, the center point is the ground. So we're grounding ourselves to the earth. But our personal point of groundedness is our heart space, how we love ourselves, how we feel about ourselves. And so we can emulate that for the people around us and create from that point. And then that falls into healing exercises, right? That's because people that have pulled themselves out of toxic systems that are built on scarcity and fear, right? All those capitalistic systems where it's a top-down structure where you're just working for somebody else's idea most of the time. It doesn't matter if you're working for McDonald's or, some other structure that's just, usually those systems are built because they're externally based. It's not, 99% of the time, it's not somebody creating from their heart space, because you don't need anybody else to create from your heart space. But it would be nice if you could connect with people and create an idea as a group that everybody agreed on, and then surrender to that idea and create from a point of surrender where everybody's being treated equally. That would be much more healing, right? And you don't see that anywhere. There isn't anywhere on this planet where you actually see that, because you're not thinking about it. It's just coming from the heart. What would that look like, right? It would create a bubble in space-time, literally. If you think about it, if everybody's creating their heart space and they fall in love with yourself, and you don't feel like you're all equal, there's no difference in potential, and you're not using your mind to judge whether or not somebody's worthy or not, right? It'd be something that we haven't seen on this planet before, or at least in recorded history. But it will happen, because that's where we're going. Because people are remembering who they are. And all we are really is just a living, beating heart. It's a vortex of giving and receiving love. And giving and receiving love can mean a lot of different things. And specifically to you, whether you create art or you love to create music or any of those things, it's specific to you. And ideally, you want to connect with people where you're empowering them to do the same. And then maybe come to an agreement as a group. It's like, what are we going to create together? And then you'll be able to relax together and enjoy the fruits of your labor together. Where can you find a business where everybody in that business is enjoying the fruits of their labor together in a balanced way, where they're not treating each other differently? It's really hard to find. I've never found it. Anyway, Thanks for showing up, guys. The next time I do a live, I want to make sure the comments are on, because I don't want to just sit up here and just talk to myself the whole time. I really want to get feedback from you guys and hear you guys' stories. You know, I love telling stories, and I love, you know, interacting with you guys. And because my story isn't any better or worse than anybody else's, right? I've gone through. I can tell you story after story after story of mostly embarrassing things, right? Stupid things that I've done to myself that, you know, I could have avoided if. But the thing is if you do avoid it, then it doesn't really humble you to the fact that we all do stupid stuff, and it's just part of growing, because everything around us is growing. And if you look at it that way, then it becomes a lot easier to head in the direction of self-mastery. And so I'm gonna end the stream here. Make sure you're falling in love with yourself, and teach everybody else to not beat themselves up over stupid, trivial things that are temporary, because those things are just temporary. It's not who you are. You are infinite potential, and always will be. Thanks, guys. Love you. Catch you on the next one.